Call our meeting to order, and I'll ask the treasurer to call the roll.
President Baker,
Present.
Mr. Brown,
Here.
Vice President Cole,
Present.
Ms. Gibbs,
Here.
Ms. Hudson, Mr. Peretti, Ms. Reyes.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer, and if no one objects, we will dispense with the Pledge of Allegiance. And we are here for a couple things. I'll read through it, and we'll have a motion to adopt the agenda. We're going to recess into executive session to talk about two separate topics. We're then going to hear from our potential search firms related to the superintendent search. We then may take some action on that, after which we will discuss next steps and adjourn the meeting. So having said that, is there a motion that we adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, Mr. Treasurer?
President Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Vice President Cole,
Yes, sir.
Ms. Gibbs,
Yes.
Ms. Reyes.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, very good. Now, I will ask the Vice President to offer a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is recommended that the Board of Education recess into executive session per section 121.22 Ohio G2 Ohio Revised Code to consider the purchase of property for public purposes, and per section 121.22 G3 Ohio Revised Code to conduct a conference with an attorney for the public body concerning disputes involving the public body that are the subject of pending or imminent court action.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All right, so I just want to, Mr. Brown, have you a question?
I do.
Have at it.
Unless you had something else to present first.
I just have another comment to make before we vote on the motion.
Okay. I just wanted to check with council on these two items that are going to be under consideration. Are those both, not just, I mean, obviously the language tracks the statute, but what you know of the purposes, are we going to get at both of those things, and are they proper subjects for executive session?
As reluctant as I am, if we request an open meeting, I can tell you that they are within the contemplation of G2 and G3 of the Sunshine Line. You can go into executive session for the purpose of considering both matters. Well, at least the one I'm familiar with, the other one I'm not. You'll have to rely on your other counsel for advice on that. But as to the first purpose, I can tell you that.
Wait, I'm sorry.
you can go in.
Excuse me, which other council?
A TAF
No, not,
For the search
for
that's not part of this executive session. Is it?
Yes, there are two
Oh.
Ohio Revised Code
Okay.
statutes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
And
They will be here?
they will.
Okay, and I guess not seeing them, I wondered, what is it that we have to talk about?
Yes, and
Yes.
they're on their way, they'll be here, and they have opined as to the other item. And
Okay,
Curtis,
okay,
it is-
fine.
It is correct.
So
Thank you.
Relying on the opinion that they evidently gave you and
Yes.
what I know about the purchase matter, you can recess into executive session.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
President.
you.
Thank you. And what I want to say before we vote is just simply there are two specific topics. One relates to real estate and one relates to potentially pending litigation. And so with the first topic, we'll have real estate related staff in the room. They will then be excused. And then the second topic, which relates to superintendent search, we will have a different set of folks in the room. And so just to be clear, we're keeping those two topics separate, even though it's one executive session. Unless there's anything else. Mr. Treasurer?
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Vice President Cole,
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs,
Yes.
Ms. Reyes.
Yes.
President Baker,
Yes.
and that motion carried.
Thank you very much. And at this time, I will ask anyone who is not here to discuss or contemplate the real estate topic to leave the room. We are now in executive session.
Friday, June 8th, to find the best firms to help us lead us in this search. I want to thank Board Member Dominic Peretti and Board Member Ramona Coles for their diligent effort in helping to bring you these four Reyes. Ramona Reyes and Don Peretti.
At least I would have taken it, you said Coates, but you said Cole.
I'm
Thank you, Ms.
thinking-
Gibbs.
So, We want to thank them for their patience. In an effort to move expeditiously, we're going to hear from the firms. We're going to give them 8 to 10 minutes to do their opening statements and then provide time for Q&A. We will go through all of the search firms and hold our discussions to the end so that we may respect and honor your time, and we're able to have our discussion and hopefully decide on a search firm for tonight. If all my colleagues are okay with that, then I will also thank Dr. Bill Reimer and Dr. George Tombaugh of the EFC for their efforts in helping us to get these firms scheduled here today. And we are joined by Dr. Deborah Hill and Dr. Kevin Kastner of the BWP and Associates. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and good evening to everyone.
Good evening.
I am Dr. Deborah Hill, and I am managing partner with BWP and Associates. And in case you're wondering what the BWP stands for, it's Bickert, Webb, Plath and Associates. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to let my colleague we're going to try to limit that to like 30 seconds so that we can keep on time. And I'll let my colleague Kevin Kastner then introduce himself. Again, I am the managing partner of BWP. I've been with the firm for about 16 years. I'm a retired school superintendent, adjunct professor, full-time professor, retired from that. So I'm obviously not doing well with retirement because I can't seem to stop working. And currently an independent consultant doing professional development. Pleased to be here in your fair city. Done quite a bit of research on Columbus and excited to make this brief presentation. Just one other thing I want to note from a professional perspective, probably the highlight of my professional career other than being a teacher and an administrator through school superintendency was that I'm the past president of ASCD, which is the largest professional organization outside of the teachers' unions. We have about 112,000 members in 119 countries, and so bringing that perspective as well. Kevin?
Between the three of us that would be working on this search, you have over 30 years of superintendent experience, but we also have experience in large systems. Dr. Harris worked in Fairfax with 180,000, and I worked in system 60,000, I worked in system 13,000. So we've had a variety of experiences in different places in Virginia or even across the country, and that type of experience gives us a pretty good perspective in addition to working with school systems of your size and others as you go from state to state. The one thing we do know, each search is different, and each search, the context of it, it comes from the direction of you as a board. So we work for you. And each of the things that you would guide us to, then that would be how it would be customized.
We have provided you with a proposal, which is, we believe, fairly in-depth, that you should have received prior to this. And so today, we've brought with us the Cliff Notes, which is a PowerPoint presentation. Again, this is something that can be customized to share with various constituent groups to give you a little bit more information in an outline form of BWP. Reading is fundamental, so I'm not going to be reading the PowerPoint to you, just sort of highlighting a few points to that because we're really interested in responding to your questions. We feel like you can read the information for us. So again, on the first page, we thought it was important for you to know that we understand and appreciate your vision, mission statement, and the district goals. And so having that understanding when we begin to recruit candidates on your behalf, we're taking that as our lead in terms of who we would be looking for to make sure that their values are in concert with your values. BWP, again, is the consolidation of 3 different firms. There are 8 partners. We have 50 associates that work with us regularly, and then a cast of hundreds beyond that because we touch base with our colleagues as we need to across the country. So we are a national search firm. If you were to hire us, there would be 3 of us that would be working with you. Myself, Dr. Kastner, and Dr. Wayne Harris. And again, we're not the sales pitch people. We are the people that would actually be working with you. Dr. Kastner and I would be co-partnering in terms of leading this particular search with assistance from not only Dr. Harris, but from the rest of our firm, wherever needed. We're going to talk quickly about the 4-step search process. I think what you will find is that most of the search firms all use a similar process, and so we're going to try to share with you how we think BWP is distinguished from our other colleagues who may come in. And so in a moment, I'm going to let Dr. Castron talk with you more specifically. But the whole notion of transparency, it was interesting looking at your website and noting that transparency is one of your primary concerns with your constituent groups. I love the dashboard, having that information right there. And again, that would be a tool that we would utilize in order to keep your communities privy to what's happening as far as the search is concerned. And that all falls under specification. We know that you have had some previous information and search and profiles and all of that. However, we feel that the relationship between your consultants and your board is of paramount importance, but also for your consultants to know the community as well. And so we would take a look at some of that data, but we would also like to get out and speak with board members individually, as well as get out in the community so that we have a clear understanding and a picture of what your the assets that you have, as well as issues and concerns, so that we can recruit the best candidate. And so that's kind of how we personalize the process. There's an outline, but we rely on the board to determine what direction you want to go in, what your timeline looks like, and all of those other facets. And so what we offer suggestions, but we move at your behest. So Kevin, you want to talk a little bit about
First of all, you've seen our application in the RFP, and you've also seen the letters of reference. I think everybody's going to get good letters of reference. We would encourage you to talk to board members that we have worked with. We think we have some very satisfied board members that believe that we've led them through a process in which we've been able to help them in the selection and happy candidates, and we've had that success record. We made some assumptions here that we don't know are correct, that if we were to get the job, we would have to talk to you and get some direction. You've gone through a process of community engagement. You have a profile. That profile was very well thought out, I would assume, and that's the type of thing that we're going to be looking to in your direction of saying, is that the match we're going to look for? But we can't just look at the profile. We need to talk with each of you and get to know your community a little bit, because if we're going to be vetting candidates, we need to be able to answer some questions and understand, the direction you're headed and the aspirations that you have. So when we did the proposal, the whole issue of the specification stage, we wouldn't need to have a redo, but we would need to have a reboot to get us involved so that we could represent you. When you get involved in the recruitment, there's some things that we would have to know. First off, what type of timeline would you be wanting? When you have, again, the uniqueness of each search, this time of the year isn't necessarily your ideal timeline, but it can be done. And then the question, when you have the timeline and the direction that you'd want to have, would then determine what you'd want to do in advertisement. You can do a quick advertisement and go electronic, but if you want something drawn out, you're going to have a whole different thing that's going to have to be through your direction. So if we find the profile you want, we find the timeline you want, then certain things like how we're going to handle the confidentiality as it applies to Ohio, because every state's different. And even though you have different laws, boards can go beyond the laws. In Virginia, for example, the boards can do pretty much what they want. They can do an open or closed search. They have the ability to have that choice by the law. However, if your laws are different and you're in a sunshine situation, then that's where the laws are, but the boards can even do it a little differently and go beyond the transparency. But that has to be determined by you, not by us. But the reason that's important, and that has to be on the front end when you're recruiting candidates, it's going to cause them how they want to make the decisions on the exposure they have or they haven't. Now, the fact that you're a very significant system, it's certainly going to be something that people would aspire to. But in aspiring to it and dealing with the match, the whole reality is if you have 18,000 school systems and 2% are only above 20,000, this isn't a system that you can necessarily have a superintendent a year that from a system that's 4,000. So there's a complexity that has to be concerned in the sense of how well they'll be able to do it. We're aware that you've got capital programs and challenges like any city system. You know, you're dealing with the buildings, and then you've got the normal budget issues, and then you've got the choice issues, and then you've got the unions. All of this will select out certain people that won't necessarily meet the match and will present their credibility to you. And you know that. So these are the things that when we talk about getting into the recruitment, then we need to be able to represent you and have the best understanding possible to see who that pool would be, that then we will get into the serious vetting of the legitimacy of their references and the people they know, the detailed Google searches that you don't want any surprises, and we're not going to give you any surprises. And we haven't given boards surprises because we do our homework. And then we get to that point when you get where we think we find candidates that meet the match. We don't rank order them. We show you who we think meet the match, and then you make the choice if you want to interview him. And of course, you're going to have the transparency of 100% of the pool. And if for some reason you want more information from someone that we don't quite think they meet it, then that's the type of thing that will serve you on that. And in the end, we will give the quality assurance. And we feel very comfortable with that. We just had a situation where we had Chesterfield County, 60,000 people. 23 months ago, they hired a great superintendent. He just left. We were doing the search or offering to do it at cost. Unfortunately, he became the State Department, head of the State Department. It was a kind of a nice job, so it was kind of, in their mind, bittersweet.
Yeah.
But we stood beside him. So they had a good candidate. He was so good that other people thought they wanted him to leave the state. So I just wanted to tell you the 4 steps are going to be the same, but the context of the steps, you have a sheet on key decisions. This sheet is applicable of whoever you hire. So we know that you control these decisions, and these decisions that you will control and help us understand the context will then lead to the specific things that you do in the recruitment. And then we have the assessment process, and then we deliver the candidates and make our recommendations to you. So with that, would you like to add anything?
Just want to then highlight the cost, because in talking with Dr. Reamer, there was a question with regards to how the cost plays out. And so what you have before you, if you will look on page 6 of the PowerPoint, in determining the cost, it really depends on the services that you get. So from our perspective, given the cost estimate that we gave you, the maximum for the search firms in would be $39,150. However, that's exclusive of the advertising, exclusive of travel of your candidates, exclusive of the external background check, because you may already have a system in place that enables you to do that. We don't know that yet. And so we peeled off those particular costs from the firm's cost to show you the differences. And again, because you have control over those other costs. You can take a look at the advertisements and say, well, we really don't want to have 2 months worth of advertising in Education Week because we're going to shorten the time frame for applications, and so we only need 30 days. And so that would reduce the advertising cost. So excuse me, so again, it enables you to have control over the costs that are directly related to the district. So I really wanted to make that distinction as you look at that spreadsheet that Dr. Reamer did with regards to BWP costs. So the slide number 13 on page 6 really kind of breaks out our costs a little bit more, if you have any questions about that. I think the final thing that I want to say before we open it up for questions,
That's okay.
I think that because of the size of the system, as Dr. Kastner said, we're going to have to really beat the bushes to find a good candidate. However, there are good candidates out there, and they will be excited to come to a district that has not only demonstrated diversity in terms of your student population, but in terms of your programs. Curriculum and instruction and assessment is kind of like my baby, my pet. And so I always do my research to find out, well, what are school systems doing relative to that? Your language program, I would put up against any language program in the country. I have not seen another website where 5 languages are used in order to communicate with the populations that you have. I've not seen another district that has the number of world languages that you've incorporated in your programs. So those kinds of pluses are things that will attract good candidates for you. But those are things that have to be shared and discussed when you're out doing the recruiting, to let people know that there are some wonderful things happening in Columbus City Schools. And if you're a progressive educator, here's something that you might consider. So again, very impressive in terms of the programs, in terms of the kinds of services that you're offering your students, in the 109 schools that you have, even the variety of school systems, the school districts, the structure of your schools is pretty impressive. So I think that we would be able to reach a hand out and share that information and get quality candidates who would be serious and interested in coming to work with you.
The other thing is, we're wired into a lot of places. Dr. Harris was the executive director of the Harvard Urban Superintendent Program, and that just goes nationwide and perhaps beyond the nation. And I belong to the Urban Superintendent Group, and so we go to annual meetings. We know these people. We have associations with the black superintendent groups. So the whole issue here is we'll be able to not only see who's out there and people that have experience in comparable type systems. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily as easy, but the people are there. And then ultimately, they have to have the match with you. They're going to interview you as much as you're going to interview them. That's the way it should be, because in the end, you want that mutual match. So you just can't advertise in Ed Week and say they're going to come. It just doesn't happen that way. We have to go beyond that, and we do. And that's where, when we talk about being a national organization, as I've learned more and more about it, it's those individual connections and all those people you see at the meetings. And frankly, we've been around for a while. And when we've been around for a while, that means we know people. And we know people that know people. And so this obviously isn't the first rodeo in the sense of working with a system like that. And you can see the diversity in some of the clients that we have been part of in placing. And they've been successful. And then they know people that know people. So that's the thing that you're looking for. You're trying to find someone that you might choose, that you can have trust in, that they're going to be straight with you. They're going to also tell you the pluses and minuses of the decisions you make, and that you know they're going to do their homework. And that's why I strongly suggest talk to people we work with. And I hope they're going to confirm that.
Questions?
Yes, thank you so much. Colleagues, we want to ask them questions, so if you can keep commentary to a concise bit and ask them some questions. And I think we'll have time for each one of us to ask a question. And our first question is going to come from Board Member Reddy.
Oh, I didn't know that was going to be the first question. All right. Well, thank you again for taking the time to come down here. Thank you very much for the material that you provided. I guess my question is, in light of the search that we just went through, and the state auditor getting involved, do you have any experience dealing with issues like that? And how do you plan on working with our independent legal counsel and our moderator to make sure that we know what we're doing is all above the line and we're taking our time and we're doing it the right way? How can you assure us that we're going to continue on that pathway?
Okay, I would respond by saying it's really about communication.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about doing your homework, and it's about looking at those rules and regulations and saying the what ifs.
Mm-hmm.
And so having that component next to this notion of transparency. I think one of the things that we find that gets us in trouble is when we're not transparent
Mhm.
about the information and the communication and who's doing what.
Mhm.
So again, by structuring it so that having the council, having whoever needs to be involved every step of the way to make sure that we are dotting all the i's and crossing the t's as we're in it, as opposed to waiting until after the fact, becomes an important aspect. And so again, including those individuals in our meetings, including updates to the community in terms of what's happening. That whole notion of transparency and communication become paramount.
Of course, we're in a situation where there are lessons to be learned. And the fact that those lessons, we should learn from them, and we should be very sensitive with the legal counsel and just making sure it's not a repeat. So unfortunately, you're in that situation, but it is something that certainly makes it even more preventable. And sometimes it isn't just the letter of the law, it sometimes can even get into the appearance. And that's the direction that the board has to go, because the board can go beyond just the minimum legal requirements, and boards have that right to do and how they want to exercise that transparency. And you as a board are at a point where you've thought through this before and you know how you want to be represented in the most important job you do.
Thank you.
All right.
Board Member Reyes?
All righty, thank you. So I appreciate you understanding the timing of the search process itself and the complexity of recruiting, the recruiting challenges, and the strength of the district. When I looked at your material, I didn't see a lot of Ohio candidates. So could you talk to me a little bit about what challenges you see, especially with the cost of labor, when you're talking about each of the different states that you have worked with, and how either that can be enticing or maybe more of a challenge when you're trying to talk to somebody, to your point, if you don't have the experience here, you may have to go out elsewhere. The cost of labor is different. How do you entice somebody to our district?
Well, I'll start. I think that, again, going back to who you are as a district becomes, for a professional educator, that becomes tantamount. Location is a secondary issue, but it's what can I bring to the table? What's already happening? How can I move forward as opposed to status quo? I think the fact that you're engaging in a national search is an important factor because they may not come from Ohio. And so you need to be prepared for that, but also the individual coming into that will need to understand what it is about Ohio that they're going to have to make, that transition and that adjustment and what that learning curve looks like. So I think that from that perspective, going into that, knowing that in terms of recruitment, again, we work with you, we work with your attorneys, we work with whoever. One of the things that's on the list is setting what's your baseline salary. What's going to be, what is it going to look like? So that we don't bring you a candidate that comes in expecting that they're going to get $400,000. Because up front, you've already identified, this is our range. This is what we can afford, this is what we think that the position is worth. And so when we begin to recruit and look at people, they know that information up front. And so you don't get into that discussion after the fact. But again, that's a part of the board discussion. Where are you going? What is it looking like? What are you looking at in terms of experience? Do they have to have been a seated superintendent in an urban area? All of those kinds of issues would then need to be discussed at the board level for you to give us direction relative to how you'd like for us to recruit.
But to that point, do you feel that the cost of labor is going to be a detriment to your search? Because we have run into some issues where superintendents are paid more in other states than they are here, regardless of what our top limit is.
Happens all the time. It's not.
Ramona, I think you might want to consider something. First off, if you're the largest system here in
Right.
Ohio, you don't want your pool to be limited just to Ohio.
Correct.
And if you want to go national, there's only 1% of the districts. A lot of these systems that have 150,000 have strong deputies. And those deputies haven't reached that level, and yet they could be top 2%ers. And so sometimes that top 2%er in a system that has the complexity and diversity of yours, they all of a sudden can become attractive candidates. Fairfax County, you know, an area superintendent has 45,000 kids. Same thing in North Carolina. In every of your states, even though you have 1% of your systems, you have some real strong key leaders that at least should be part of the pool. But the idea of the national competitiveness, that threshold, we'd have to learn more from you about that type of data. And we understand that's a reality check. But also it gets to a point that if you find somebody that you absolutely knows the winner, then you're gonna, it becomes a negotiation. But originally, and we've had some candidates that make huge salaries, and we'll say, the direction of the board is, don't expect that here, that's not gonna happen, that's not gonna meet the threshold of the community. We're gonna need that communication from you to eliminate not wasting your time or their time in doing that.
Thank you. Board Member Brown.
Thank you. And thank you for being here. The information was very helpful. The presentation, as far as been helpful. I know you touched on a couple of the challenges that we face. You mentioned the timing and obviously the reality that we went through a search without an outcome that was good. And I know you've done your homework on us. So what challenges do you see that we face in particular, and how do you help us overcome those challenges? What are the other things out there that get in the way of a successful search, and in particular of having a large, high-quality, diverse pool of candidates?
I think the Sunshine Law is a challenge. You can't ignore that. And so the thing is, somebody wants to come here to make a difference. And there are people that want to come here to make a difference. Now, you can understand, I was born and raised in Ohio. I was at the stadium when the horseshoe was still open. So I know Ohio. I know Columbus. I mean, so the question is, the fact that I haven't been a superintendent of Ohio doesn't mean that this is a destination place. And you have people out there that want the opportunity to work in a place with a fantastic university around it. Look, you have so many things that are really, if people want to see the glass half full, they're here. And if people are looking for excuses, you don't want them. So the question is, our job, and it's not a hard job, is to talk about some of the places you've been, but also where you're going. You've got some things out there that, they might have caused some issues, and we know those. Well, those are over. It's a new day. It's a board. The most important thing that I think happens is in a superintendent search, a system gathers momentum. And it gathers the type of momentum that takes you to that type of level. So it doesn't necessarily have to be 50 candidates. All you're looking is for one. And you're looking for that one that knows this is a place that they want to come and make a difference. And so I think the pool will be smaller. It will be smaller. But I think Deb has said, that doesn't mean there aren't some people out there. And frankly, we don't have a pool or a stable where we have candidates already here. We're going to start over each time we do a search. But we do know some people that might have an interest, and we're going to work for you for that if we got the job.
And just a little tiny addendum to that particular piece is that, again, it's selling you. People will make some sacrifices and do some other things in terms of if they can believe that they're coming someplace where they can engage and be a part of the communities and make a difference. And so that's our job, is to also sell you in terms of garnering interest in the district.
I want to just add, see, a system 50,000 is a lot different than a system 150,000. See, you can still get your so I'm saying you can get your arms around this, and it also improves some of the pool a little bit, because some of those places that have been the deputies where they've already had 40 or 50,000. So I just think that I think there's some people out there.
And the final challenge is that in looking at the board in and of itself, one of the first questions that we get from candidates is, tell us about the board. And at this point, this board, you only have a couple of people who, may be transitioning off. So you're a solid institution and organization at this point from the perspective of a board member. So, or a board that a superintendent would come in and work with. So while that may be a challenge in some aspects, it's really a plus for someone coming into the system. Because they're not going to see that half the people that hired them are going to be gone next year.
Yeah, I actually love the representation you have on the board. Each of you are unique. Each of you, and I mean unique in the sense of the background. No, I'm talking about the different things you're bringing to the table that represent the totality of this community. So those are the types of things that I think are attractive to me.
And help us override those challenges.
I do, I believe so.
Thank you.
Vice President Cole or Board Member Hudson?
My questions were covered, thank you.
Okay.
I just had one question, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. Can you tease out a bit more for us your candidate screening process? Give us an idea of how, based on what you've seen about us and our pursuit of good to great, what you see in terms of our current representation, how are you going to kind of tease out from a national perspective who's going to be the most quality candidate for us to look at, and how do we not become overwhelmed in that process at the same time?
Well, part of our job is to keep you from being overwhelmed.
Excellent.
So that's the first step. I think that, again, our knowing what you're looking for becomes another critical mass. And so that's why that notion of engaging with the board as well as the community becomes really an important aspect when we go out to recruit. And what we do is we headhunt. We don't just put out the application and say, okay, it's open season, just apply, because you will get applications from bus drivers and maintenance men. Not that they might not be able to do the job, they may not have the credentials, but you'll get all kinds of applications from people who really are not qualified. And so you have to tease those out. But you tease those out based on what you're looking for, what the board and the community has determined that they are looking for with regards to that. And so when you get down to that particular level and you'll relook at the profile that you created, you may want to add some things, may want to change some things, then we go out and touch people on the shoulder. I became a school superintendent not because it was something that I wanted to be when I grew up. I became a school superintendent because someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, I know of a little school district where they really are looking for a superintendent that has a solid curriculum base because they're concerned about some of their programs. And I'm like, I like being assistant superintendent. I don't want to be a superintendent when I grow up. Well, no, go out and talk with them. Well, sure enough, I got that job as the superintendent. But again, it was because someone tapped me on the shoulder, not because I had the impetus to apply initially, but someone was looking. And so from our network perspective, again, with Dr. Harris's Harvard connections, and honestly, Kevin knows everybody. He knows everybody across the country. My ASCD connections are both national and international. We know people who know people who know people. But you have to give them a framework to work from. You have to say that this person needs to have a skill set in looking at facilities. This person needs to have a skill set at looking at multicultural perspective in terms of how your curriculum is designed. So again, we take from you what you're looking for, and then we go out and not only screen applicants, people who think they have what you want and apply, but we talk to people. There's something to be said with all of the media and technology. There's something to be said about having a face-to-face conversation with someone that you know and respect, who can then say, we had a superintendent that did X, Y, and Z that might be interested. And so we will make that call, and we will tap them on the shoulder, and we will go behind the scenes and say, we've heard that this person has done this and done that. Is that true? So we do a lot of communication, one-on-one, face-to-face conversation, rather than just relying on paperwork.
Michael, I'm president of Cambridge Strategic Services. We've done over 1,000 strategic plans in this country in the last 20 or 30 years. I haven't been there for all that time, but I'm saying that's where we learn a lot of people in a lot of states. I also happen to be a peer reviewer for Race to the Top, and I knew Ohio well, although I'm bound by confidence, but you had a great proposal in your state. You had a lot to, and there's a lot of things, you know, that, so I'm just saying, we met a lot of people there. I'm just saying, this awareness sometimes comes indirectly from other things that you're part of, but we are still, at least I can speak for all three of us, we're still pretty active. And that activity is a bonus in the sense of having people, when we get asked, give us some people you think might be a good, someone we should talk to. You know, even you as board members, you should be telling us if there's somebody maybe we could talk to, because you need to keep a neutrality. But when we never say it came from you or whatever, but sometimes we'll get some of our best candidates because you know people who are either in your system, have been in your system, or in a neighboring system, or even a neighboring state, that they've gone somewhere. So that's where we're leaving all these lines open.
President Baker, do you have any questions?
No, thank you very much, Ms. Gibbs.
Well,
Can I ask one more?
Oh, wait a minute. Let me ask one question of you. This search is going to be surrounded by a very unique team. One that includes a mediator, Mr. Froelich, who's here, our legal team, and the support from our ESC. So we really are onboarding our next search firm to do just that, to help us identify the next best superintendent for this district. Can you tell me about a time and how you would handle leading 7 very talented people who may want to go a different direction, but you think it's best for us to go to the left and we really want to go right? How do you handle difference of opinions with board members when you know in your professional opinion that there is a better way?
I worked with an ASCD board of 30 from different states. So everyone had a different opinion, perspective on a lot of different things. And I think from my standpoint, part of it is getting people to understand what the issue is, what the question is, and we're building consensus around that. And you may not agree, but you also need to disagree in an agreeable manner and recognize, so what's the end goal? How are we going to get there? And do some consensus building. One of the aspects that we do is we march along beside you. We help you design your interview questions. We help you talk about how are you going to reach consensus. We present you with strategies that you could use, and you determine which one that you want to use, whether you want to use a 5 to 5. You know, if you agree in a total agreement, then you raise a 5. If you're in somewhat of agreement, then you raise a 4. But we walk you through those kinds of strategies in order to help you get to what the end goal is. But everybody has to be on the same page about what the end goal is. And if the end goal is to find the best possible fit for your school system, matched to the profile that you've agreed upon and created, then how are we going to get there? When some people think, well, maybe this, and some people think, well, maybe that. And it really boils down to communication and conversation. And as Dr. Kastner said earlier, a lot of that is the trust that you build with your consultants, that they're going to tell you the truth. One of the things I say I love about this position as a consultant is that I work with the board. I'm dating them. I'm not married to them. So consequently, I can tell you what I really think, and you can choose to agree or disagree, but it won't be that you have to go on the other side.
Shauna, if you have a profile that you as a board have reached a consensus with, and we're using that to vet the candidates, we'll see the ones that will meet it. But a board doesn't start out by saying this is the one. You start out which ones least meet the profile, and you start the process of elimination, not that these people aren't good, but in putting them, lining them up against some of the others, then you have to start that way as opposed to trying to think you're going to reach the first one right away. It's not an easy process. Hopefully you have such good candidates that it will make it hard. But you're, as a board, you're capable people. And the most important thing you do, and I'll tell you, I have not run into one situation where board didn't kind of work this out, and even to the point that, and I'll say this is just my opinion, no one wants to come with a 4-3 vote if it becomes public. And that's the type of thing that, that's where the interview goes both ways. And the thing is, whether that becomes public or not public, I don't know what, I just want to tell you that this is a time when you hope that you want to work towards that consensus. It's in everybody's best interest, but it's also in everybody's best interest to debate long and hard, because it only brings out things better. So we think that's part of the process.
Thank you, Board Member Ray.
Thank you. I'll keep it real quick. What is your process if a search must be restarted because it doesn't garner the right candidate or a candidate?
I'm not sure, talk to me a little bit more about.
So we set a plan, we say by December 31st, I'm just throwing, we have, you will hire a candidate. And on December 31st, you can't get to consensus, you can't get to a vote. Perhaps you have candidates that get 2 votes, 1 vote, 3 votes, and you don't have a good pool of candidate based on your feedback. Or you have 3 candidates and they all get offers before we give them an offer, so you don't have a candidate. What is your process if you?
We keep working.
You go to Plan
Work
B.
until filled.
You go to Plan
When you
B.
reach that point, a way is then until filled. And the thing is, you shouldn't compromise if you can't find a candidate that you're satisfied with. It's too important a decision. And in the long run, it's more important to take that extra time. We're not going away. If we're working with you, and that's what you desire, we're in for the whole thing. And you just keep working, and then all of a sudden, the time of the year might be different. The time of the year might bring up someone in a different situation. So it can happen. I haven't seen it happen very often, but I would rather continue something than to compromise something that you're not going to be able to feel good about for the long term.
Thank you. This wasn't in your quality assurance piece.
Yeah, last question, Board
Thank you,
Vice President
thank
Cole.
you so much. Public participation, the community participation, you mentioned that early on in the discourse. How have you, particularly in the finalist phase of things, incorporated public participation in the hiring process, so to speak?
Well, let me talk about one of the strategies that I recommend to the board, and it's called a day in the district. And you take your finalist candidates, the 2 or 3 who are your finalists, and you ask them to come to the district for a day. And you set up a full day and this is a part of your second round interview with them, but you set up a full day in the district where they have an opportunity to visit schools. You may have representatives from your focus groups come. And one of the things that's important in terms of transparency with the community is they have to understand that they don't get to vote. That it's the board's decision and it's the board's vote. Their role is to provide you with input. So in structuring this, if you have 3 candidates, each one has a different day, hopefully within the same week. They would not be meeting with the same groups, and we have a little feedback form that they then provide. They're given the profile, because remember, we're basing all of this on the profile that's been developed, the people who are the constituency groups, and then they give you feedback. This candidate seems to meet this profile in these areas. This candidate's communication was not clear. That kind of data and that kind of information. But we ask that people only go to see 1 candidate, not 2, not 3, because they're not getting a chance to vote. And that becomes very, very important so that they're not doing the comparisons and unhappy with the one that you selected because I like candidate A over candidate B. Well, you really only got a chance to see candidate A. And you gave us feedback about your perception of candidate A.
Michael, here's where your transparency law works for you. Because people know they're going to be identified, as opposed of where some places where they can go either way, there's going to be reluctance. So if they're going to be in this, they're going to be in this. I did a day at the district in Princeton, which the community takes this stuff seriously. From 7 in the morning till 10 at night. And one of the hardest days, but it was a good day, and the transparency was there, and the newspapers had the coverage, and the board made the decision. I didn't get the job, but boy, the process I thought was terrific. So I've been there and done that. And I thought it was in that community and the threshold that they had, that was a great decision on their part that they did that.
It also includes you're doing a site visit. It also could, because they're coming to your district, so you can do your research and your informal checks within their system without going there. But to have them come in to the community and environment that you're inviting them in, it has a whole different level of expectation. We have them bring their spouse or their significant other, and by the end of the day, the last part of it is when you'd have a social activity, dinner. It wouldn't necessarily be the full board. You know, have groups of board do that, and then you would have your final interview with them at the conclusion of that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for the materials you have provided. Dr. Reimer and Dr. Tombaugh from the ARC will follow up with you regarding our decision.
Okay, terrific. Good luck.
Thank
This
you.
is a tough job, but we need people to do it because it's really all about the kids.
Thank you
right.
so much.
And I want people to remember that it's about the kids.
It is.
You gotta find somebody leading the kids. Can I go down this way?
Colleagues, we're moving in alphabetical order. Dr. Hill, I was waiting for you to come around. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You can come around this way without having to navigate all
So the
that.
next step is Pierce.
Thank you for waiting for me.
Yeah. Entertainment, Pierce?
Yes, it is.
I didn't, that's not me. That was over here on somebody's pad. I just.
I think it would be rude that I could start on Zoom. That's a shit to the same thing.
No, not for like the camera, that's right. Watch it when I write. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, no, not ready. That's right there. Yeah.
Save your discretion. That's the worst thing that can
Taken care of.
It won't be again.
Come on.
OSBA is here too.
Yeah, who put this together?
Do you,
Oh, there's lots of water.
yeah,
Did everybody have one of these? I bought, you asked me to bring these.
Yes. Did you update it with their feedback?
I got no other
we
feedback.
got no other feedback, but we did
It's
it.
right now.
I didn't know who else.
But you knocked out the other people.
You have these, right? I did nothing to it. This is me.
Unless you guys talk about that. And then we just have that all.
They didn't answer my possibility.
Is it that they just elected not to change? Selected not to show?
Oh, your name. There it goes.
I color coded it.
Michael.
But that's why I said thank you. I just did it.
Gary.
Thanks for inviting us.
Good.
I guess standing some extras.
Is it different than the one we put?
No, it was not.
Hi.
We'll be, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, mine didn't print all the way. Mine didn't print all the way.
Don Jacobson.
I don't have legal size.
How you doing? Dominic Peretti, how are you?
Sir? Oops, sorry. You probably should have come.
Good evening. How are you doing? Good.
Scan.
Probably could have done this a little easier than that.
I can.
Yeah. Garrett's good at that.
Should have thought you guys were coming in the first time.
Were you?
Thank you.
Okay. You tell them how much they have and I'll mark it. Oh. Ms. Gibbs?
Yes. Well, good evening. Welcome to Columbus City Schools. We are glad you are here. Today we have with us the McPherson and Jacobson team of Dr. Thomas Jacobson and Dr. Marjorie Wallace. We are here to find our search firm to find our next superintendent. So thank you for applying. We would like you to open with giving us about 8 to 10 minutes of a presentation. We want to put a name to the face to all of our, all the beautiful material that you have brought, and then we'll open it for Q&A from our colleagues.
Okay, thank you.
That's okay?
I'd like to have Dr. Wallace quickly introduce herself.
Okay, and probably the fastest way for time efficiency is on page 25 of our proposal. You can learn about me, and as you're looking at that, I'll just tell you, I worked for 42 years, retiring as the executive director of an ESA, 17 school districts. They're called intermediate units in Pennsylvania, but they have them here in Ohio. In fact, I was on the board, the national board, with someone here from Columbus. So I'm right across the border in the Erie area. I've done many searches when I worked there at the intermediate unit. And since retiring 6 years ago, I have done several searches for McPherson and Jacobson. Many of them urban searches, such as yours. Some of them have been in Raleigh, Charlotte, Jacksonville, Florida, and presently we're working at Jackson, Mississippi. So with that said, I certainly hope you select us to help you with your search. I would really love working here with you, and I wish you the best of luck too with whatever you do.
Third member of our team, Dr. Renee Willis, will also be on the team. She's a superintendent at Richmond Heights, and she has a board meeting tonight, so that's why she's not here with us. My name's Tom Jacobson. I'm the founder, co-founder, and owner of McPherson and Jacobson. And I'm going to just hit some of the highlights about our difference and what would make us different. We're a leading national firm. We've conducted over 700 searches during our 27 years. We have 125 consultants across the United States. That's important when we talk about recruiting. We're well connected to quality individuals. When we decided to take our firm national, we said, what would distinguish us from the other firms? We have hung our hat on transparency. We believe in a very open, transparent process with high involvement of your stakeholders while keeping you in complete control of the process. And we involve them up front, getting information from them about your school district, about your issues, and about what they'd like to see in a new superintendent. We also recommend that a committee of those various groups have an opportunity to meet the candidates and visit with them and then submit their opinions to you. So that's how we do that. We are recruiters with talent. Once you tell us what it is you're looking for, once we've got your selection criteria, we are then reaching out to individuals that will be meeting those criteria and encouraging them to apply. It's an open process, anybody can apply. It's through our website. We get between 200,000 and 300,000 hits a month on our website because we're a top national firm to do that. I want to talk a little bit about screening candidates, how we do that, and because I think we do this better than anybody else. We start by reading every folder of every individual that applied for the process, and we begin comparing them against your selection criteria and what we heard from your community to do that. And we begin a sorting process as we do that. Who are starting to meet the criteria you said you're looking for. We then begin our vetting process, In the 42 years that I've been doing this, I've yet to find somebody out put a reference down doesn't like them. We know that. We start with those individuals. We have our list of questions around what you're looking for. We have 2 questions at the end that are critical to us. Anything in this person's background, if it became public information, would be an embarrassment to this district. That's when we learned along the way. We should say, any skeletons or anything I haven't asked you. When you ask it that way, it's pretty tough to say no if there is something. Usually there's a hesitation, and we will say, this is confidential. We're professional consultants. Tell us what you know. 99% of the time there's nothing, but occasionally there is. Just because we hear it from one person doesn't make it so. And so our last question, would you give us a name of 2 or 3 other individuals that could speak to this person's ability? They do. We call them and ask them the same list of questions, including give us a name of 2 or 3 other individuals that can speak to this person's ability. We go a minimum of 3 removed from primary references. And what we're looking for is consistency of answers. What are the strengths, what are the deficiencies that we're finding out about these? We're talking amongst ourselves as a team, and we're taking a look at individuals that we'll be bringing into you. When we come to meet with you, we bring you a list of everybody that applied. We don't take anybody's name off the list, but we'll have created a short list. Here are the 5, 6, 7 that we think are most closely meeting what you're looking for. We will have a video of each one of them. We'll have a written overview of each one of them and a pack of information about them to share with you. According to National School Board Association and Council of Greater City Schools, average tenure for superintendents is between 3.2 and 4.2 years. For the past 5 years, 75% of our placements are still on the job for which we placed them. For the past 10 years, excuse me, almost over 50%, and for the past 15 years, almost 50%. So that retention rate. Sustainability of leadership is critical to student achievement. Research done by Marzano and Waters show that when you get the right person and they stay, student achievement goes up. The fee for our program is on page 63, is $29,900 for a fee, to be capped at $44,750 total. That would include expenses. I've given this presentation to you before, so you've heard my spiel. Let me stop and give you plenty of time for your questions.
Board Member Peretti?
Sure.
So I'm sure you're well aware how our last search ended up, and currently we have surrounded ourselves with a new team with independent legal counsel, a mediator, the ESC. Tell me what we went through and any similar issues you may have dealt with in the past, and how you can help us navigate it so we don't find ourselves in that situation again.
I think the biggest thing is that we've got a proven process. It's been around for 27 years. With the retention rate, we know it works. And so we would like you to stay as close to that process as you can. However, we will tailor the search to meet your unique needs. We've got a process we recommend to you, but if you have certain things that you would like us to do, we'll build that into the process.
Okay.
Board Member Reyes?
So I'll ask the same question just for consistency. So in researching your material, I noticed that there are not a lot of superintendents from Ohio mentioned in your material. Can you talk to me a little bit about your recruitment experience in Ohio and the issue of perhaps the cost of labor between states, from state to state, and how that may be either a pro or a con as you're recruiting candidates for us?
We have not done a search in Ohio. But as I tell everybody, our clients get 100% of our attention. If you're the first in the state, you're going to get 125% of our attention, because our business is based on reputation. And we've always had a first one in every state we've worked in. We've worked in, I think, 32 states to do that. So we've got a top team for you that's outlined in those resumes, and it's a very diverse team. And when we talk about outreach to your community, those will be the people I'll be conducting.
Thank you. Board Member Hudson?
Thank you, Board Member Gibbs. Thank you for being here. So, to follow up on Board Member Peretti's question, given what we've been through, tell us what you learned from Omaha, and maybe how what can we learn from that process as well, and to have a successful outcome.
I think a fresh start is always good. Many searches get bumps in the road. Some go astray and have to start over again. I think you as board members probably learn as much as anybody as to what not to do and what to do next time. And we're here to shepherd you through that. Again, it's your process. We want you to own the process. We want you to feel it's yours. We're here as advisors for you to take you through that.
Board Member Brown?
Sure. I know that you've done your homework and looked at what we've done so far, what didn't work out, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on what the challenges are, given that background. What do we face, and how do we overcome those challenges?
You want to do that?
Well, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
We're working, as Margie mentioned, we're working with Jackson, Mississippi. I'm not comparing you to Jackson, Mississippi, but they were taken over by the state. And they have an appointed board now by the mayor. And when they talked about recruiting to this, would we be able to, we ended up with 49 candidates. And we ended up with 8 solid candidates to come in. Because what we do is we share your story with the candidates so they know what it is and what's going on. What we don't, and as we share those, we call them the issues, what are the issues here that they need to deal with? Some of our candidates are going to say, I don't want to touch it. Some of our candidates are going to say, that's my specialty, let me have it. And I think that's what we've got going in Jackson right now. We've got strong individuals that are going to be turnaround superintendents for their school district. And I think here, if we share your story with the applicants, the candidates, we're going to be able to have them say to us, I'm really good at this, or I don't want to touch it. And we don't want to waste your time, so if they don't want to touch it, we don't want to spend time with them, with you.
Right.
Awesome. Vice President Cole.
Thank you so very much. Thank you all for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
My first question is around non-traditional talent. Can you tell us about your penchant, your skill set, any focus at all that you may have on finding talent in unconventional places? And I'll just kind of preface it with this. We're in an odd timeline where we're looking for a superintendent. We're well aware that there might be scarce opportunity out there, but that's when you leverage the opportunity to be able to find unconventional people that still are time-tested and proven. Can you tell us about that?
We have a national recruiter, Dr. Steve Joel, well connected not only in education but also in business. We have had districts that asked us to recruit non-traditional candidates, and we've had. I would say probably only about 4 or 5 of our placements of those 700 were non-traditional. But the shining example is in Olympia, Washington, where we did this about 7, 8 years ago. And the person that got hired was a banker and is being very successful in doing it. So we have the capability to reach out to non-traditional candidates if that's your desire, and to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Excuse me, it wasn't Olympia, it was North Thurston, Washington, right next to Olympia.
President Baker.
Ms. Gibbs, your policy is not to recruit individuals you have previously placed.
Right. We wouldn't have a retention rate if we did that.
So what if there's some fabulous candidates who you've placed previously who may be good matches for us?
If they choose to apply, that's fine, but we won't be actively recruiting them. We want them to stay where they are and be successful. But we have had people that we have placed that have applied through us, and they probably have been there 5, 6, 7 years, and it's time for them probably to look at something different.
So that wouldn't then preclude that individual from
No.
coming here?
We just, it's not that they can't apply, we just want to actively recruit them.
Okay.
Because we're proud of that retention rate, we like to keep that going.
Right, and you wouldn't want us to do that to you if they do something, so we don't do that.
Ever?
No, I've never done it, you ever recruit anybody that we place?
Not our placements.
No.
Other people's placements we go hard after.
Yeah. Gloves off for that, okay?
Well, so my question for you is this. You're coming to Columbus and we have a very unique team for this search. Every search is different. We have a team, as Board Member Peretti says, of our legal team, we have mediators, we have our ESE to help us. And we are really trying to pick the very best firm to lead the search to find the superintendent. And we're gonna pick one who has the best experience and the best fit with our board. So tell me about a time or how you would handle in a situation where the board may want to go left, but you know it's probably best for us to go right. And how do you manage a difference of opinion in that way? And how would you help navigate these 7 talented but very quiet board members that we have? If you thought in your professional opinion didn't line up with maybe where the board direction was going.
When I do my training with the consultants, and they go through training yearly, I talk about modeling a search that meets your needs for every district. But we have a saying, if it's not illegal, if it's not immoral, if it's not ethical, we'll do it. If it's any one of those 3, we won't. That's our, our public persona, and that's our work ethic to do that. Now, as you talk about the different entities working here in urban searches, we did Orange County, and we worked with a search committee of 27 individuals from the community through that process. When we did Las Vegas, Nevada, we had numerous groups to work with there. And so we've had that experience of working with diverse groups, numerous groups, with varying interests to do that and be able to manage it. With our transparent process, when we work through those groups, we're neutral outsiders. We're just here to listen and then make recommendations to you. And during the search process, we will make recommendations to you on our protocol and explain why we do it this way and what our experience is. Now, again, if it's not illegal, immoral, unethical, we'll do it your way.
Board Member Reyes?
Gotta ask my question again. So what is your process if a search must be restarted because it doesn't garner the right candidate or a candidate?
And that's what we're going to tell you during this process. We're going to bring in what we feel are the best people. But after you have finished the interview process, we don't want you to hire somebody to have a body here. We want you to have the right one. So we're committed to work with you to successfully chosen a new superintendent. And at that point, we'll offer a 2-year guarantee. If something happens and the person can't continue, even if they become sick, we'll redo your search for expenses only. Another piece that I forgot to talk about at the very beginning, once you've hired your superintendent, we come back and work with you for a year. We do help you establish performance objectives for your new superintendent for the first 12 months. Also, the day-to-day operation of this organization. We think that really contributes to that retention rate because that transition of expectations, your superintendent's expectations are clarified.
Now you said you guarantee that for 2 years? Or?
2 years. Does it say 1 year in there?
Yeah,
I just changed it, it's 2 years.
2 years, all right.
Okay.
That's painful too.
Vice
I'm not negotiating. He said it.
Vice President Cole, did you have your hand up for a second question?
I did, and I thank you so much, Board Member Gibbs. You mentioned just slightly early at the top of your presentation that you did involve the public in some of phases of the hiring process. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure.
And particularly for me, I'm interested in knowing how you involve public participation in the finalist process.
Okay. The internal stakeholders are pretty easy to identify. Teachers, central office personnel, principals, students, classified staff, and those are groups that we want to meet with. But every community is unique, and so we're going to ask you, what are the community groups that you want us to meet with? For sure, we'd like to have 2 or 3 open community forums at a minimum. But again, we have met with chambers of commerce, we have met with city government, we have met with state government, ministerial alliances, whatever is important to you. And here's what we do with those groups. We have 4 questions. Tell us the good things about this community and tell us the good things about this school district. That's important because we're selling you to the candidates and we need to talk about what you're offering them. The 3rd question, if you could talk to this new superintendent as he or she comes in, what would you want them to know? What are the issues here that they need to be aware of? And that's where we begin developing the matrix. And then the last question we ask them, based on that, what are the skill sets you think this person needs to go forward? We write down everything we hear from every person. You're gonna get a bound report, and it identifies them by groups, not by individuals, of everything we hear from everybody. You're gonna get an executive summary of the reoccurring themes we heard from the various groups. And because we can't reach out to everybody, can't get everybody there, we also post those 4 questions online, so people can give their input to it, and we can do it in multiple languages to do that. We'll give you that bound report, and we recommend that you post that on your website so people can see it and know that they've been heard. What we do is we write down everything we hear from them. After we're done, we repeat everything we wrote down so that they know they've been listened to and that they've been heard. Once we get to the interview piece, let me use teachers as a subgroup because that's a common one, everybody. When we meet with the teachers, we want to hear from every teacher that is one. We don't want anybody in your community to say they did not have an opportunity to provide input into this process. But when we get down to the interview piece, we want a committee about maybe 8 to 10 teachers that are representative of your teachers. Same thing with principals, same thing with all the groups to do that. As we work with those groups, there will be a chairperson. And what we say to the chairperson, we take them through the process and logistics. They're doing 2 things. Selling this community and school district to the candidate. And that's an important piece because this is a 2-way decision-making process. And they're going to have an opinion about the candidate, which they're going to submit to you as a board. Now, when we first started, we had those chair people come in and meet with the board. We send out evaluations to all board members after every search. We got the collective wisdom of about 5,000 board members. And we had those committee come out, and the board evaluation said that wasn't fun. They ranked them, they lobbied us. The teachers, number 1 was our number 4. So we went back to our consultants and said, this is an important piece. How do we do it? How do we get this out? So now what we do, immediately after meeting the candidate, the subgroup has a piece of paper to fill out. It says, John Doe, Jane Doe, here's what we liked about them. Here's any concerns we had about them. They put it in an envelope, they seal it, they give it to a contact person. After you have interviewed all your candidates and had your discussion, you then open and read those. I sat with the board a few years ago, where they interviewed 4 candidates, deadlocked on 2. After an hour and a half discussion, I said, let's open and read the input. And all the groups had one of the candidates above the other one. So meaningful input into your decision, but keeping you in control of that decision. Sometimes one just comes right to the top and do it. When people know they've been meaningfully listened to and involved, they support your decision.
If there's no other questions, we thank you very much for your time, and Dr. Reimer, Dr. George Tombaugh from the ESC will follow up with our presentation.
When will you be making a decision?
Our goal is to make it tonight.
If we're chosen, we'd like to start as soon as possible.
Oh, so would we. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for being outside.
Oh, that's illegal.
Thank you, sir.
I was gonna say.
People let me trip over.
See you.
Nice seeing you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
He said these one, that would be great.
Who's at the rest of them, please, see, everyone's going. Yes.
Well, they keep going,
Yes,
they
we
keep
keep
thinking about food.
We want food, is that right, Mr. Pereira?
I'm always hungry.
He might say babe.
I'm thinking maybe we should order some pizza or something.
Right? We have another hour. We can make it, we've done it longer
Yeah,
before.
2 more.
Remember back in the day we did 11:30?
And I just don't want to write red meat.
I feel like I've seen y'all.
When I first got on the board.
You called Bill to let him know?
We don't, Bill doesn't have a phone, but we'll be fine,
Might be stranger danger.
Little kids logistics.
That's right. Football practice.
That's the way you use your neighbors.
Absolutely, I'm thank you.
I already have another neighbor taking care of my dogs.
You gonna stand until it's time?
No.
Well played.
Good afternoon.
You can stand, I mean, you can sit for a while.
Yeah, I do.
Good evening.
Was he still at the NAACP meeting?
Here we go.
Yes.
He stepped out and answered the phone because it was me. What a
I
man.
said, hey, baby. He was like, hey, baby.
I believe it.
Right.
Board member Gibbs, your direction.
Ready, well, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes. Talking to you colleagues, good
Yes.
evening. Check in to make sure everybody's okay. We are here, we're very glad to have with us Mr. Steve Horton from the Ohio School Boards Association. Mr. Horton, we're here to interview and find the next search firm to find our next superintendent. We are very glad that you're here. Thank you for your patience. And we're going to give you an opportunity to open with an 8 to 10 minute presentation, something we may not have read in the material, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, if that's okay.
Great, great.
You have the floor.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, to speak with you all, and hopefully answer all your questions. Well, I understand you have a copy of our proposal.
Yes.
I had a chance to look at that, so I was just gonna outline the main points that we like to make whenever we talk to a board about our search services. Point out as well that my two colleagues in this process, Cheryl Ryan and Terry Morgan, are both out in other districts tonight. Thus I got the assignment of coming here and talking with all of you. But we have actually talked about it quite a bit, and if we were to be the firm to assist you with this search, we would, all three of us, would be really equally be sharing the work involved with the search. So I just wanted to point that out, that they're here in spirit, and I'll certainly be following up with them following tonight. I do just want to spend a little bit of time talking about the things that we at OSBA think are most important about any search that we facilitate. We realize coming into this that this is the board's decision. This is your critical decision that you make as a team. And we approach every search that we do really from the board's perspective. We're the statewide board professional support agency organization. And so it's our job to work with boards of education in a number of capacities, searches just being one of them. So really our perspective when we come into this is we don't work on behalf of candidates. We really feel like we work on behalf of the board. It's our job to make sure that we get to know all of you, develop a profile for that search, find out what you're looking for, and then really work to make sure that in the end you can match up with the best possible candidate out there. So that's always our approach. When we go into a search, I was just going to walk through some of the things that we always discuss about the basic 5 steps. I think probably the most important thing about the search that I talk about is the process. In fact, when we go through searches, that's all we talk about is the process, because that is the means by which you as a unit can move effectively and efficiently through the whole ordeal of attracting candidates, looking at those candidates, evaluating them, and ultimately making a decision. So we think the process is central to that. Having said that, no search is the same, regardless of what district we're working with. We've done very close to 1,000 searches over the last 30 years with our organization. One of the things that we feel very strongly about is there's not a district in the state of Ohio that we haven't worked with at one time or another in our history of doing this work. So we know the state very, very well. We know the boards of education around the state very well. And it's always our job to make sure that we're accommodating the board's needs, but also to make sure that the board is moving together through the 5 steps. So the way we always look at it is the 5 steps of the search. This may be very similar to what you've heard from other firms. But obviously the first step that we come in, including tonight, would be learning what it is you're looking for. What is the profile that you want in your ideal candidate? And then moving forward to promote the job. Part of the recruiting process that we work very hard at is making sure that people out, not just in the state but around the country, understand what an attractive opportunity this is. And that it's their opportunity to work with you as a board. So the promotion part of it from our standpoint is very, very important. We go through a number of steps to make sure that if somebody out there is interested in the Columbus City Schools superintendent position, they will know about this job. So it's also our job to make sure that we're speaking with candidates, fielding the questions that they may have, helping them understand more about all of you and about the district and about the position. One of the things that we have put together that we're very proud of and feel very strongly about is an online application system that we've really developed over the last, well, it's been 4 years. And it was a process of looking at the way we were doing searches and really deciding what we didn't like about what we were doing. And really at the top of that list was the inability for the board to really have a good look at candidates when we come in to do the screening portion of it, to talk about the candidates. In the old school paper days, we would come in with a big box full of files, and some of those files were an inch thick. And there was so much material in them gathered that it was difficult to really successfully move through it. So with that, and to improve our candidates' experience with the whole search process, we developed what we call ESOAP, which is our electronic online application process. So candidates develop their profile online. They ultimately submit that profile and they become a candidate for the position at that point. So we always tell candidates, this is our recruiting period. This is the deadline. If you don't want to hit submit until that deadline time, you certainly, as a candidate, have that right, that option. A lot of them take that option. But it's not until that actually gets submitted that they become an official applicant. And what that allows us to do is to collect everything in one portal that we provide to each of you as board members. My favorite part of this process is how dynamic the screening meetings have become, because you have the opportunity to go into your own secure portal, look at all of the information for the candidates, the same information that we have, and to make your own determination about the candidates. We do the same on our end, along with the screening committee, and then we come in ultimately in the screening process and we sit down and we go through that list of candidates with you. One of the things that we do as a firm, and that we hold to with every search we do, is we believe very strongly that the board deserves to see every candidate. No candidate is ever eliminated from the pool. If there's 40 candidates in the pool, you see all 40 of them. We evaluate all the candidates in the pool. So there's never a situation where we come in and we say, these are the candidates that you should interview. We come in and we say, these are the candidates that we think very highly of, based on our knowledge of your district and your profile that we've worked together to develop. But now it's up to all of us to have a conversation and make a decision on who we think should move on in the process. And so we work very, like I said, dynamically with the board, in that you've seen them, you have your questions, you have the things that you like about candidates, we have the things that we like, and we come together and discuss all the candidates in the pool. And that takes us really into step 4. After we've done the recruiting, we've done the screening process for the candidates, then it's working with you to develop the interview tools for the search. We work with the board to develop a very tight first round interview with those first round people. We work with the board to ultimately put together what you want your second round interviews to be with your finalists. And we've done a variety of different things with boards as far as how those candidates presented, how you meet them. We've had community forums, we've had interview teams that we've worked with the board to put together to help with the interviewing in the second round and to give input. But ultimately, with that process, you're the ones who make the final determination. we do another step along with that, in that process between first and second round interviews, where we have all finalist candidates take our Achiever assessment, which is actually a scientifically proven assessment. It's been used in the corporate world quite a bit, but we took that tool with that company and adapted it for our process of looking at superintendents and treasurers. So it benchmarks the candidates, so you can see what kind of personality traits they exhibit and how they work with people and communicate and all those things that you get a glimpse of an interview. It just gives you a more complete picture of your candidates. We want you ultimately to come down to the end of that search process to be able to look at the data that you have from reference checking, from the Achiever assessment, from the interviews that you've done, all the materials they've submitted, and be able to come down to it and say, we think this candidate is the one that best fits this position, and ultimately make that decision moving forward. So that is the process in a very quick nutshell. But I think I have hit on the things that we really think are most important throughout any search that we do, whether it's superintendent or treasurer that we're looking for. And so with that, I'll open it up to all of you for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Horton. I'm going to start with Board Member Reyes.
Hello, thank you. So as you're aware, we are attempting to conduct a national search. So we're very aware of your reach in the state of Ohio, being the largest district, and looking for some of our talent to have experience in large urban districts. Can you talk to me a little bit about your experience of bringing national talent to Ohio? And does the cost of labor have any impact on your success?
Not really an impact on success. The biggest reach that we have and the best method that we have for looking outside of the state of Ohio is through an organization that we're very much involved in called NAS. You probably saw that in the proposal. It's the National Affiliation of Superintendent Searchers. It's 39 of the associations like us that do searches within their states. But with that, we really are a very strong national network. We work very closely with that group, both in the area of best practices, the way we run our searches, but then also when it comes to working with and attracting and bringing candidates to the table. That is the biggest reach we have. We also are very much connected with the National School Boards Association, with the CUBE organization, with the Council of Great City Schools. We work very closely with those organizations, and through that they also have a pool of actually a lot of very talented, diverse candidates that are kind of grooming to move into that superintendent role as well, or have had experience directly working with and being in administration of large districts like Columbus.
And you've had success bringing people from out of state into the Ohio districts you work with?
Actually, we have. Now, our experience within Ohio, with most of the districts in Ohio is, yes, they want to see candidates from outside the state, but most often they really want to look at the candidates that they have in the state. We have placed outside our candidates from outside the state, but our experience is that most often boards end up going with somebody who's within their own state, ultimately. So.
Thank you. Board Member Peretti.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming down today. I guess my question is, as you know, our last search was not successful. We've gone through great lengths to make sure that we get the search right and we get the best fit here by making sure we have independent legal counsel, working with our ESC, and making sure we have a mediator as well. Tell me how OSBA will work with us and work with all those pieces, and tell me about your experience working with sunshine laws.
Okay. Well, given that we work with and support boards of education, we're pretty familiar with sunshine laws. One of the advances we have is really the strongest minds in the state are in our legal division when it comes to school law and sunshine law specifically. So we're very, very conscious of it. We developed our process to work within the means of sunshine law and yet offer you the opportunity to really do your diligence
Mhm.
and to do the very best you can in doing your work within the bounds of the law, but doing it in a way that allows you to really fairly evaluate and make a good decision for the board. We feel very strongly that there is no legal or ethical means for going outside of those laws. We don't skirt around them. We realize that as an agency of the board, public records are public records. We also believe very strongly in working with the media organizations anytime we do a search. And we've done searches that have had significant media scrutiny for whatever reason. And so our mindset coming into it is that we don't want to have an adversarial relationship. We want to work with the media. We want it to be a search that's open and that has integrity, and that in the end you can be proud of and be proud of the person that you selected to be your next district leader. Thank you very much.
Board Member Moore?
Sure, thank you. I know you've done some homework about our experience, and you're local and have gotten to see perhaps part of that firsthand. What do you see as some of the challenges and obstacles that we're facing, and how do we overcome those? How do you help us overcome those things? We want to maintain a good size, diverse, high quality group of candidates, and we want a successful search. So how do we get there given the obstacles and the challenges?
And the challenges, well, it certainly makes it more difficult. There's no way to get around that. This search is very public, and so there is always that stress that's going to be around the search. Probably the big thing is we don't try to run from that. We're not going to try and hide from the fact that, yes, it has become a very public search, that there's going to be a lot of scrutiny around how you and whomever you choose to work with you in facilitating the search actually does the work. So, but I think probably what's most important, and we've had a lot of conversation about this internally at the organization, that what's most important is to make very clear with all of us as a team. I'll go back to the process. This is the process. This is the way we need to conduct a search from beginning to end. We don't deviate from that process. As facilitators, it's most important for us to make sure that the board is on track, that the board's moving together, that everybody's communicating, that everybody knows what's happening at any given time in the search, and that, we use a transparency word probably too much, but it's very important that we're not trying to circumvent the process. We're not allowing anything to deviate from it. Whether it's candidates in the pool, whether it's the way we go about screening candidates, however that's done, it needs to be done by the process. And that's, I don't care what the district is. That's how you ensure that you have a good search with integrity, with transparency, that ultimately finds the best possible candidate for the position. And to the other part of your question, as I'm talking to candidates, I would share that with them. Because candidates applying for the position are going to have those questions about how is this going to be handled? What is that process? They have a lot on the line as candidates. And I would share with them that same conversation, that this is a very clearly defined process. The board is very much married to that process, and this is the way it's going to work, so that there's no surprises.
Vice President Cole?
Thank you, Board Member Gibbs. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. I'm gonna try and put it in 2 and 1.
Okay.
The first one is public engagement. How is OSBA in the search process actually involved the public in the process? I admire what you have kind of alluded to in your relationship with the media and how valuable you see that. So I really like that. But how have you involved other stakeholders in the hiring process of looking for a superintendent, particularly even finalists?
We think, as part of every superintendent process we do, we have public focus groups. We typically do those in groups. In other words, we'll meet with groups of teachers, groups of support staff, groups of administrators, with the public themselves. I've had meetings with PTA and PTO representatives, chambers of commerce, and that really gets set up by the board along with us. What are the most important groups that you need to hear from among your stakeholders? Obviously, we know going into this that there's a vast difference between Columbus City Schools and a typical Ohio local school district in terms of the scope of the stakeholders that you need to hear from, the scope of the scheduling that would be involved in meeting. But we really believe strongly in those face-to-face meetings. We have also worked electronically with districts to create a very simple feedback tool that people can share. So if they can't get to a focus group, they have that option to be able to share as well. Those are all things that we do prior to the screening and the evaluation process so that you have input from your stakeholder groups and you hear those. The other part of it is, as I've already alluded to, the first round interviews that we set up are always very, very well scripted. In other words, all the candidates hear the same questions, they're based in the same time frame, so that you can evaluate candidates against each other. Once you come down to a finalist selection of candidates, then we open up quite a bit. And we've done a number of different approaches with boards. From, again, having meet and greet sessions with community, open community forums where people are allowed to ask questions. The most common version of that that I've done in several districts has been people come in, they submit questions to the facilitator asks that of the candidates, and then they're allowed to answer, and we provide a means by which the people who are there can provide feedback for the board. That's a very common scenario. We've had groups of representatives from, again, your employee groups, whether it's administration or certified or classified staff, specific stakeholder groups. Maybe it's community business leaders that you bring together. Maybe it's involved parents, those kind of groups. But we've opened up and had the opportunity for people to come in and sit down and be part of the process and meet the candidates, share input. All of that boards have found very, very useful in making their final determination. But that door's kind of wide open for the second round interviews with the board.
Thank you. President Baker?
So, ma'am, thank you.
Board Member Hudson?
I guess what's waiting for me, Stephen, thank you for being here. Maybe I'll ask it, how has OSBA modified its process since our prior process ended? I know you publicly spoke out kind of contrary to the state auditor, and so I had a little exchange with your general counsel that I wasn't really pleased with, but
Really?
maybe
Okay.
I would say is, you know, how's OSBA modified its process?
We haven't done a great deal of modification. One of the things that we have done, and this is by process that the board has requested, that we finish a screening meeting and then they come out into public session and make a public motion that, based on our conversations, we would like to consider the following candidates for the first round interviews. Other than that, our use of executive session, our use of the vetting process that we go through with the candidates is very much in line with the Sunshine Law. We feel very strongly about that. And again, it goes to the process. Stick with the process, and that allows everything to move and work as it should.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you so much for coming. So my question is that, again, every search is different.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, we're here surrounded by an amazing team for this search. We now have legal counsel, we have our mediator, we have support from our ESC. So we're looking for the search firm to really lead and guide us to find our next best superintendent. So tell me about a time you were in a search and how you would handle the idea that we as a board may want to go one way but from your professional experience and best practice, you know we should probably go another way. How would you approach that, and how would you get us on track?
Well, that's not something that hasn't happened in previous searches. And so really, I think the most important thing there is to very clearly lay out what we want to happen during the search. From the beginning in our initial planning meeting, as a design team of the process, what's going to be most important, what is the timeline? Probably the biggest part of it is monitoring the timeline. That these are the dates that we set as the major milestones that we need to hit. In a case where the board might want to divert, it really is my job or any of my colleagues as facilitators' jobs to have the conversation with the board that this is why we do what we do. This is why the process is set up the way it is. It's not something that was just created, it's something that's evolved over the last 30 plus years of doing this work. And there's a reason for that, so that it works smoothly for everybody involved and allows everybody to remain on the same page. I think the other part of that too, that I feel very strongly about, is that when I communicate as a facilitator, I communicate, my colleagues feel the same way, that we communicate to the entire board. It's not, we might have individual conversations with individual board members with questions and other things, but the actual communication goes to the entire board, so that everybody is on the same page as far as the information moving forward and what is needed and when, and all of those things. And it's also incumbent on the board members to hold yourselves accountable as well. That this is what we agreed to, this is the way we need to do it. And again, there's a reason for that. It's not arbitrary. So.
Thank you. Board Member Reyes.
Thank you. So what is your process if a search must be restarted because it doesn't garner the right candidate or candidate? And can you also share with me what your guarantee once a candidate's placed?
Our guarantee is really pretty straightforward. We do not walk away from a search until you have somebody in place in that position. If something happens within the first 6 months typically of that search, something falls through, something doesn't work out, we work with the board to reopen a search. And yes, we have reopened searches for different reasons. It's a variety of reasons why that might happen, but I think our biggest thing is it's very simple. We would never close a search until you have a candidate in place. So if it means we reopen and we go through the process again, then that's what we do. If it means that we work with a board to help find an interim to put in place while that's happening, then that's part of the process, part of what we do.
And once you place them, do you have any guarantees as far as, like, some firms will say, as long as if the person that was placed leaves within the first year, then they do it no cost?
Yeah, within the first year.
Within the first year.
Yeah.
And do you have parameters on if you will go back and get a candidate? So do you have a 3-year time frame or a 5-year time frame?
Hands off.
Okay.
Oh,
Have a hands-off
no,
policy.
we don't have any policy like that. Anybody's welcome to interview or to apply for any search that we do.
Colleagues, are there any further questions? Vice President Gold.
I thank you very quickly. Do you have a non-compete clause? I think I heard you say
She
you
just
didn't,
said.
but I just want to
Yeah.
be sure.
That's what she said.
Okay, wonderful. The other piece is how do you encourage boards to identify unconventional talent, non-traditional folks who, you might still regard as having a strong enough background to work with us?
Really, that's in looking at each one of the candidates and sharing what we see are the strengths and the weaknesses. If we see strengths in a candidate for a position, but they don't come from a traditional path, and maybe their experiences aren't a traditional superintendent's experiences, our job as facilitators is to make sure that we share that with you. This is what we think is strong. This is why we think this candidate could be strong. Ultimately, it's your decision as a board as to whom you would actually consider from the pool. The other thing that we make very clear that I think is important is that once the pool is opened, until that search is actually closed, and a candidate, you've taken official action on a candidate, the pool is never closed. That pool is always open. And we make that very clear to the candidates as well. They may not have selected you to move on to the first round interviews, but in no way have you been eliminated from contention. And it's not out of the question that a board has requested to go back and look at other candidates that were in the pool and interview them, even after that fact. That's one of those things that, where deviations may come into play or in question with the search, but it's, I think that's very important. We don't, as a firm, eliminate, nor do we have any kind of non-compete clause among the candidates. Our job is not to find a candidate a job. Our job is to work with the board to find the right candidate. That's always been our philosophy.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Owen. We appreciate your time, and Dr. Tomball, Dr. Ramos, and the ESC will follow up.
Great.
All right.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
Well, good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, well, awesome. Well, we are here. We thank you for your time and your patience. We are here to hear from you and to pick the very best firm to help us find our next superintendent. Our goal is to give you about 8 to 10 minutes to share information about who you are, about your team. We have your proposals in front of us. And to give you 8 to 10 minutes to give us a brief presentation, and then we'll open it up for Q&A.
Did you hear that, Mike?
I did.
Yes, so colleagues.
He can multitask.
Yeah, colleagues, we are on Ray and Associates, and we are joined by Mr. Mike Collins and Ms. Janine Donaldson. You have the floor.
Good evening. Thank you very much. On behalf of Ray and Associates, and actually our president, Ryan Ray, who is disappointed but actually going through a little bit of a trying time, that's why he's not with us. Unexpectedly on Thursday, his grandmother died, and all the funeral parts are going on today and tomorrow. So this weekend we had a long discussion, and he needs to be with his family. So we ask you to understand. It's a pleasure to see all of you again. Good news for us is a lot of what you've heard about our history is still the same, except expanded, because during that time frame, the firm's done about 30 more searches as they continues to grow. Janine and I have the privilege of primarily being the associates that service Ohio and maybe Western Pennsylvania and Eastern Indiana. So we were all divided by regions. I'm not going to spend a lot of time boring with who I am, because first of all, you were born before, and secondly, I am blessed to have familiarity around the table. So it's a privilege to be here. We're thrilled to have the opportunity to speak to you, Ken. And we're really interested in, we'll share kind of the Ray story. I'm happy to do that. But we're much more interested in your questions and this conversation, and to really discuss how this relationship could be a difference maker. It's a pleasure for me to introduce, I'm kind of the driver because this is the brains, but to introduce Janine Donaldson, who comes to you as a 12-year board member in Lorraine, and she'll tell you much more, and also the current CEO of the Elyria YWCA.
Good evening. As Mike says, that's who I am. Who else I am is, I grew up in Sandusky. I work in Elyria and Lorraine, and I live in Lorraine, and I went to college at Oberlin. So I'm kind of a Midwest girl. Mike knows everyone around the table, kind of, so I just think I need to explain to you why I'm with Ray and Associates. I left the Lorraine Board of Education with the school board, I believe it was 2007 was my last year, and had served three 4-year terms. Probably after about 3 years of being on the school board, I was approached by the owner of the company, Mr. Ray, about becoming an associate. And the reason being because we had such a positive experience with Ray and Associates. We hired
two of our superintendents under them. The first person was Dr. Dee Morgan. Many of you might know her. She was a deputy superintendent along with Jean Harris when Rosa was the superintendent of schools. And when Dr. Morgan came to Lorraine City Schools, she did a phenomenal job. And I understand that she's still very active with the Department of Education. Following her through Ray and Associates, we had so much success there that we went back to them when it was time to find another person. And the other person that we found was Dr. Cheryl Atkinson. And Cheryl stayed with us for, both women stayed with us for their full terms. They were each, I think, 6 years respectively of being our superintendents. So I know firsthand of what Ray and Associates can do. Lorraine City School District is an urban school district. We're heavily unionized. We are heavily scrutinized by the public. Right now, we're going through things. We are the only other school district in the state of Ohio outside of Youngstown that is under state supervision. And so, but now I'm kind of an outsider looking in and seeing kind of where that board went wrong. And much of what they did wrong was in hiring the search firm. Yeah, that's where they went wrong. So, and then my other affiliation down here in Columbus has been with, under Governor Ted Strickland, I was appointed to the Ohio Civil Rights Commission, and then appointed the chairperson by Taft appointed me and Strickland made me the chairperson. So I have familiarity with the area, but what I'm most passionate about is public schools and providing the best leadership for public schools, because all kids can learn. All kids can learn, but it's a matter of who is guiding your district. And for many years, Columbus Schools has been a stellar organization, and you deserve the best. And I think that Ray Associates can do that for you. So I'm not going to talk to you about the process because you have our information there and we presented to you before. So the process really is kind of the same. But where I think you really need to look at us more seriously, probably than other firms, is in our approach to doing our work. We take the profile, the candidate profile, very seriously. That's your opportunity to interface through us with your board, with your stakeholders in the community, with the public, and get their input of what they're looking for. And Mike and I was talking about this earlier, that we probably would even recommend to you that outside of what we normally do, what we normally do would be to interview board members. And then from there, you tell us who else you want us to interview, conduct community focus groups, similar to what we did down in Cincinnati. Those were highly successful. We did 16
In 2.5 days.
in 2.5 days, but wow, did we learn a lot from the community. We met in places like the Community Action Agency, we met in church basements, we met at the, what would be similar to what is the Capitol Club here? For
Yeah.
business? Okay, well in Cincinnati it's called something else, Queen City Club, I believe, where all the key business leaders
It
came.
would be the equivalent of the partnership.
And so, and we met with those folks, and anybody else that the board recommended that we review. And that helped us to know who we were going to bring to you. But what I also wanted to share with you about that experience was, particularly for you all, I would recommend that you might want to come up with a list of your own 40 key stakeholders. We did this when we did this, well, I did the search for the state superintendent, and at that time the governor's office came up with 40 key stakeholders that they wanted us to do personal interviews with, not as a group, but calling them on the phone or sitting down with them, but coming up with their ideas of what they're looking for in a superintendent. And I think at this particular juncture in your search, I would highly recommend something like that, and that would include parents group, clergy, nonprofit like Rotary clubs and things of that sort. So the other reason that Mike and I work together is because we're regional. I typically don't do searches that are outside of like Ohio, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Michigan. And that's the same for our other 170 associates that we have throughout the country. And the benefit for you all is that when we start putting that profile together and we know what that profile is going to be for the applicant, then we'll send it out to our associates, and our associates will reach out to the folks that they know in their area. Just like down here, we know the D. Morgans of the world, and we know your former superintendents and people that we can reach out to. Our associates in Texas know that. And by the way, the owner of the company, Ryan Ray, and his dad, they're rock stars when it comes to interacting with high levels with superintendents and also executive officers on the staff. I got a chance to go to the Great City Schools Conference, and Ryan and Mr. Ray and I we met privately with folks that we potentially want to look at for some school district jobs. And he just seemed to know everyone there because he had placed so many candidates in their position. And so that brings us down to relationships, that we are going to find the right person for the school district. We're not going to find a person that needs a job, because most people that need a job, you don't necessarily want them. You want folks that didn't even know that Columbus Schools was available and the kinds of things that Columbus City Schools do. And so that's our job, though, is to reach out to our associates so that they can reach out to the folks that they know. Another key piece that we found critical at Lorraine City Schools when we were doing our search is that Ray and Associates has a full-time office, that when you need documents, when you need your brochures, or if you have suggestions for how you want them to do things, you call the office and they will take care of it, and they'll work with your district staff, whoever your point person is for the search, they'll work with them. I have a colleague that had recently started working for another firm out of state, and she was saying to me, well, Janine, you know, I really enjoy the work, but the problem is I just don't have time to make copies of everything. I don't have time to make copies of packets to give to the board members, or to create the flyer and that sort of thing. And I'm thinking, you don't have an office that does that? Because, you know, I do have a full-time job. And so this is a consulting job for me. And no, I don't have time to make copies. These copies don't come from us. These copies come from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And whatever else you need will come from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So I just think right there is something that if you haven't asked other firms, you need to find out who's providing that information to them. We do the typical background checks, but when we get down to the 2 or 3 district candidates that you are serious about, then we will go into extensive background checks, including running their social security number, checking their credentials and their previous work experiences and relationships in the community. We will do that deep dive of a search. I think I'll stop there.
Okay. As our time is waning, so that because we're much more interested in what you want to know directly. I've had 2 experiences with Ray and Associates when I sat on that side of the table. It just happened to be in a building down the street. But I've been in, I personally went through 6 searches, 2 in West, 2 locally and 4 statewide. But more importantly is, it's a real process. When we did Cincinnati, we had 62 completed applications. We had over 90, just 30 weren't completed. We eventually brought that board. We narrowed it to 18 internally. We shared that, but we brought them 10. And when we bring you 10, 12, whatever this magic number you decide is, you also get videos. So, and they're asked standardized questions. You'll know what the questions are in advance if you wanted to add one or whatever. It's a time frame. So you're actually at least going to see who you're even considering at that level before you get into even who you want to interview. Then the interviews are arranged. All this is built on this profile. This whole profile about talking to the community and talking to you all that determines what kind of candidate you want. The other thing is we provide a community survey that you put up, that you announce, and we will provide it in any language you want. And that community survey, with this district of this size, will be very disappointed if those numbers aren't in the thousands in responses. In addition to that, and that will build the profile. And it's from that. And then we do the searches not only for our own catalog, if you will, but we talk about these associates. So Janine's got hers. I was blessed because of my past experiences. I mean, I have a contact list of 145 superintendents, alone, and multiply that by how many. And at the same time, this will be a reflection of you. Our biggest job is to bring you the best pool possible in the country. And there is nobody that has a pool bigger than this firm. And our second part of this job is to be a reflection of what you're looking for in general and what begins to fill this profile that you believe can take you to the next step. You have climbed many mountains in the last 6 years or so, and we all know what those are. And tip of the hat to all of you. And God knows it's been a pleasure to be a cheerleader. And at the same time, probably your biggest challenge is how do you keep that going? And that's really why we're here. And in all honesty, if I didn't really believe that we couldn't do this, and I say we, I'm fortunate enough to be a very small part of the big we. But the fact of the matter is, there are real assets with Janine's experiences, some of what I know locally, and who we know. And most importantly, the assets. And Ryan Ray will be involved in this search. So you're actually going to get a team of 3. You don't get us all at once most of the time. But the fact of the matter is that this will be based on who Columbus is looking for. And then more importantly, here's a cadre of candidates that you're not going to find anybody else is going to give you. The only other thing I want to add to this conversation, and I'll get quiet quickly, is that, and this isn't, it just needs to be said. Ray & Associates in the last 12 years has done follow-up searches for searches that had challenges and have placed in all 12 very significant candidates that have been successful. And in all candor, almost a handful of those were from your predecessor. So this isn't a foreign language, it's not an easy thing to do. It'll take a little bite into the pool, so let's just be candid. But the fact of the matter is, the endorsement of this solicitation of a firm of 42 years in this size and scope makes those who might have said, not so sure, take a second look. And that's probably as big an asset as all the other assets that Ray & Associate brings. So we're going to get quiet because, unfortunately, we're at 13 minutes. So sorry, Sean, we didn't do what we were told.
It was my fault.
No.
I came all the way from north.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate everything that you shared with us, and we appreciate, we'll give you back 3 minutes for it. But we're going to start with some questions from our colleagues. I'm going to start with Board Member Peretti.
Sure. Thank you so much for coming down again. I really appreciate it. Michael, thank you as well. As you know, our last search was not successful. And since then we've been able to incorporate independent legal counsel, mediator, been working with the ESC. Tell me about how you'll be able to work with them, and also this is going to be a process where we're going to be very transparent and going further than the law says when it comes to sunshine, public records, and etc. Tell us how, if you've ever had any challenging searches like that, because I know Ohio is a little different than other states when it comes to this, and how do you work with us to make sure we get this search right?
Well, first of all, we're thrilled to have an opportunity to work with Bill and George in the ESC, and we do know them, and they'll be a great asset. We have not had the privilege to work with representatives of Taft yet. I want to thank you for your seat.
That's right.
They're over there. As a mediator. Bill's our mediator.
I'm sorry. But most importantly is your guidance in terms of, we all think we know the sunshine laws and the open records laws and so forth. We'll need your guidance and your expertise. And we have been so familiar with this, so let me give you the latest one. So in February, an associate of ours fell ill and had to have surgery, and I got called in. The only problem was it was in the Badlands of North Dakota, and it was February. It was not warm. It was not a fun trip. They actually do even their final interviews in public. I had never seen that before. And honestly, Ray Associates said South Dakota's the only other one they know that does that. So we have experience with the extremes. And in all honesty, through Ryan, we would call an associate if we have a circumstance that says, have you done this before? But we've touched all pieces and parts of that. We want to be extremely respectful for your guidance and what's required. And at the same time, those things that are believed to be appropriate and legal, that also, you know, preserve some sense of the identity, particularly in the front rounds of a candidate from an executive standpoint. You'll need to guide us on those as well. We are well aware, and we've had this discussion internally, that because of the public side of this, that we will specifically reach out to candidates who won't feel impeded to be an applicant. And we're very candid. When we were doing Cincinnati, there's a rock star who's now actually the #2 in Boston, who would have been a rock star in Cincinnati. And Laura's doing, she's doing a marvelous job, so no misunderstand, but she's a fabulous superintendent. But we called him and said, look, it's probably going to open up in 10 and not in 5. And he withdrew. So we actually talked to them about this. So we're not going to bring you somebody that's going to get down to the finals and withdraw. That's the other part of this. So those are our assurances, but I'm much more encouraged by working with you as the guidance for this and how we need to proceed. But when you get into finalists actually in a public interview session, we had never seen that before.
And the flip side too is that there have been districts that we've had to walk away from because they didn't want to
Yes.
follow us in terms of the ethics and the transparency.
That's very important.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much.
Board Member Reyes. Thank you. So thank you for the list of the superintendent searches that you've done. It seems like you've touched on a couple of Ohio searches, and you've got them pretty much spread out throughout the country. Could you talk to me a little bit about your challenge of bringing that national scope and recruiting a candidate from another state to come to Ohio? The cost of labor issues that might be incurred, any challenges that you might come into attracting that type of talent from outside the state that could possibly be a good qualified candidate for us?
That's usually not the issue. I mean, we find that because, again, we are targeting the folks that we're going after, that they know what they're coming to. And particularly in a district like yours, it is kind of a plum job. I mean, yeah, you've had a few hiccups there, but it is a plum job for someone to come to. So that's not going to be a challenge for us.
Our experiences will also suggest to you, Ramona, that given Columbus's now growing notoriety and its actually appeal in an environment with a cost of living environment that is sort of like bigger than its worth. I hate it when I get into it. Anyway, so forgive me. The appeal for here and the cost of living in Ohio in general makes this even more attractive. We are not talking about bringing people to places that, we are what, the 18th largest city in America, but we still rank like 48th or 49th in the cost of living. And so that has not been an issue. The labor piece is not really very unfamiliar for the kind of people that you're going to see. They might not have had a significant labor environment in one place, but they're already in that place that does. So at least, and I can tell you for sure in Cincinnati, it didn't come up once.
Right, yeah. In fact, in Cincinnati, when we were talking to the chamber folk, that they have a saying that Cincinnati, because most of the CEOs of the Fortune 500 companies in Cincinnati, they weren't from Cincinnati. But they had a saying that Cincinnati is a place that you wouldn't think you'd want to come to, but now it's a place you wouldn't think you want to leave. And so that's kind of how I would view Columbus.
Okay. Thank you. Board Member Brown.
Thank you, and thanks to both of you. It's great to see you both again.
Good.
Based on what you know of our prior search, what you know of us, and obviously that's a fair amount, what challenges do you see us having in acquiring a high-quality, diverse pool of candidates, and how do you overcome those kinds of challenges?
Okay. Eric, you really, it's kind of like today's news becomes yesterday news. I don't know that some of the challenges will be that impeding. I think they'll raise a question, and I think with what they really, when they investigate and look, will be able to move past. Your continual growth in student performance, your potential continual growth in enrollment, the fact that the budget numbers are only getting better, and budget challenges in urban locations are not new to any of these kind of candidates. So we sometimes see what's in our face at the moment. I think our conversations about what has transpired here that you have all led in the last 6 years or so is a very different view and message. And secondly is that I think they'll find and you'll find that their conversation or their art, where we bring them as a profile, and also the potential of the affiliation you have with the elected officials, the business community, your parent and student and nonprofit organization. Once you get a chance to see what we see outside of Columbus, what we don't necessarily always appreciate, it's really at times when you're saying, where is the support? How much more it is than it is in many places, or at least the access this seat has to those places. I think those become very significant. So I think they're there. There will be no avoidance in our conversations with these candidates. But most of these folks, this isn't their first rodeo, and they really will come here as a place to make a mark. We could bring you a deputy or two, but they will come from who knows where, and they'll bring a different kind of talent with different exposure. It's always interesting who you find that you can't imagine it. And the other thing I've learned over this time, real quick, is an anecdote, and I know we need to move on. So I grew up in upstate New York, and there was this outstanding candidate that came from Rochester. Well, guess what? It wasn't Rochester, New York. It's that other Rochester, which is really big. and he was a rock star. So I don't think those are things that will raise questions. I don't think they limit the environment whatsoever.
But Eric, that's why I also brought up the point of those interviews with key stakeholders in the community. Because I think that it's going to be a matter of how the community feels about the school board and the search, that they will have an impact on the candidates. So it will behoove you to invest early on doing some damage control with your constituencies, whoever you determine your constituency to be. And I don't think it's going to take a lot, but I do think they want to be courted. They want to know that they matter, and that's what we're going to do.
Thank you so much. Vice President Cole.
Thank you so much, and as always, thank you so much for being back with us. My question is about unconventional talent. Can you give us more the experience you all had, your process in terms of identifying non-traditional folks to do this kind of work and work with districts our size?
Well, we usually have to pose that question to the board and say, are you willing to accept that? Because we, through our associates, we have quite a few non-traditional second career kinds of candidates, folks that maybe started off in education but then decided to go into business and now want to come back to education. That's like a hybrid candidate. But then the non-traditional one is a person that was actually running companies, and they view running a school district like running a company. So we have access to all of that. Again, that's the benefit of being a 42-year-old firm with 170 associates throughout the country.
If it's of great importance, Michael, we actually have a list, and I'm sorry you didn't bring it, that we could provide you the placements like in the last so many years that came from unconventional environments. Most of them have a touch in education somewhere, as well as the private sector, regardless of what order. Very few are dramatic in that they never had a touch in the educational environment before they came back to this. But if that's something you desire, you just need to let us know. I mean, you'll have it in 24 hours.
Mike, another question? Board Member Hudson? So, my question is this, and again, thank you for being here. As you know, if you've heard, we have a very unique team and every single search is different. And so, tell me about a time and tell me how you would approach the situation where in your 42-year professional opinion and in your expertise, you believe we should go one way and the board is headed the other way. How would you address that, and how would you approach us to get the search on track, in your professional opinion?
They're saying the search got off track.
Well, no, we were at a...
Because just because you want to go
we're
one
at a-
way and we want another doesn't necessarily mean it went off track.
Well,
So,
no, but how would, if you knew that this was the best way to go, and the board wanted to go a different way, how would you approach that?
Well,
I mean, because we get
it
along
depends
all
on
the
if the
time.
different way is ethical and legal. That's, if it's outside of those guidelines, then we just have to part ways. But in terms of just having a differing opinion, it's first and foremost your search. It's your search, you know your district, but it would be our responsibility to try to bring consensus among you, and I think it's really going to be about the relationships. If we do what we say we're going to do, you're going to see that we are bringing you the best information that we have. But if you still want to go your own way, it is your search.
Yeah, I see it much more as offering you, facilitating and offering you prerogatives. It's, the experience says, in District X, we saw this also, and here's what transpired. And know that we really do operate at this significant team. I mean, it's the kind of thing that, it's almost like a lab. If there's a question or a circumstance, you kind of put it out there. And then all of a sudden we find Sally, and she's already been through that experience, and she just happens to be in New Mexico, and we begin to have this conversation. So some of it is our expertise. It's the firm's expertise. I mean, it's the firm's tangents. But it will always be if and when we differ. If you proceed this way, here's a few things that we've seen. Our feeling is this way because of this. It's not our decision. Okay. We'll give you the options and the prerogatives. We're here to really facilitate and guide. To give you an example, is we really have, we have this matrix where you individually actually compare as the funnel gets narrow. When we ask you to compare one candidate against another. And we're the only ones that know your results, if you will. We share with you who are the leaders in such a matrix system, but we're not taking a blackboard and tallying votes. It's strictly a consensus building environment. I hope that gets at what you're looking for, Shauna, but I think the thing you really need to know is we will share the differences. We will share our differences as persons mean very little. What we will share is what our experiences dictate that we've seen in this case or this case. And then from that, you all need to decide where you want to go.
Thank you so much. Board Member Reyes.
Thank you. We also understand, that there are challenges in the timing of the search, perhaps the caliber of candidates, the recruitment challenges, and so forth. What is your process if the search must be restarted because it doesn't garner the right candidate or candidates?
So if we went through the entire, we went through the building of the profile, posting of it, and so forth.
And we went through the final interview stage and something happened and we still don't have a final candidate.
It's our responsibility to go back to the drawing board and no additional expense to you. You also know in our proposal that we have a statement that says, if it doesn't work out for reasons that are related to the search, within I think it's, I'm trying to remember, it's a 1 or 2 year time frame, we will conduct it again at no cost. So it's very clear, and that will be in our agreement. It's totally a practice, if you will. Thank goodness I can tell you that we're not really aware of it in that case. And I think there are about 4 or 5 in 42 years where it didn't work out after the person was hired, and they had to go back and do it again. But you can put it on one hand.
Are there any additional questions? Colleagues, well, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. And Dr. Ram or Dr. Tombaugh from the ESC will talk about that.
Is there a board member missing? Nobody's here. Okay.
The only thing I would like to add, if I may, we didn't get a chance to bring it up. It will be, and you'll choose what to do with this, but when you get down to those final, when we talk about involvement and so forth, we are more than happy to orchestrate, and we do this most often, a process where we can also take those finalists to select environments and groups. And nobody there gets to vote. But we do pass out consistent what we call impression sheets. So if you had 8 groups that they went to over a period of time before you did your final interview, we will collect and give you the impression sheets so you can actually look at them by groups. So as you form your final recommendation, you can at least have the information if you choose to proceed that way. It's not by any means a must. It's just something we're very familiar with, and we're actually pretty big proponents of, if that helps the cause.
Well, thank you very much. And with that, colleagues, President Baker, that concludes the presentation of firms, and we would like a 5-minute recess.
Colleagues, we will recess for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
You can go to the
It's so
bathroom
good.
in 5 minutes.
He didn't have questions. That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that.
Oh.
Ms. Gibbs,
Yes.
I would like to thank you for your leadership. I'd like to thank members Peretti and Reyes as well for your work on this. And the floor is yours, Ms. Gibbs.
Yes, thank you very much, President Baker. Thank you, colleagues. We did it. We did it. I believe the 4 firms that we were able to see, they're all capable of doing the work, right? All 4 of them have extensive experience in what we do, and they all gave us some very good material. The last pieces of paper that you'll see are from Ray & Associates, where they did another cost calculation that they feel will be more, and another one that's advantageous. So they were just all very good. So we're here to consider BWP and Associates, McPherson and Jacobson, the Ohio School Board Association, and Ray & Associates. In the interest of time, President Baker, I was hoping we can go around the table and everyone give their top 2. And if everyone gives their top 2, we can then put those candidates on, kind of on the floor, and let us begin to discuss what those are. Tonight we are hoping to select a search firm, and after that selection, they will go into negotiations with our legal team to make sure we can dig a bit deeper into that contract, dot I's and cross T's, and then we will actually vote on the contract at a later date. And so, colleagues, that is the process that we have before us. If everyone is okay with that process, President Baker.
All right, thank you very much.
Let's start.
Mr. Brown, would you like to go first?
And at this point, we're just identifying top 2.
Your top 2.
Mine, yeah, that's what my top 2 would be BWP and Ray and Associates. And are you looking for ranking on these at this
Yeah.
point? Okay.
Conversation.
All right, Board Member Hudson?
Those would be my top two as well.
Okay. And Mr. Preddy?
Same.
Reyes?
Same.
This could be easier than we thought. Mr. Vice President?
BWP and McPherson.
And mine are the same as the Vice President's. And Board Member Gibbs?
BWP and McPherson. Which is very close to OSBA, I'm sorry, but.
All right.
You only get two.
Well, colleagues, I'll say this, we all like BWP. So, Ms. Gibbs, what do you think?
It could be quicker than I thought. And understanding that all of them were very good, but if we have everyone has a number one, they were on both of everyone had a number one and a number two, but we all had BWP.
She's hungry, BWP. Almost didn't do that.
But I had raised one point higher.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs.
I could never be that quick to.
Yes.
So is that,
I'm looking at my two colleagues on my subcommittee. Yes. And so I would offer that, is everyone comfortable with BWP? Is that a yes?
I liked them a lot.
I like them a lot.
have you a motion you'd like to offer?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure everybody want to have any discussion or comment. Okay. Then I move that we select BWP and Associates search firm and to authorize our legal counsel TAP to enter into contractual negotiations. Final approval will be contingent upon approval by the board of the final terms.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any additional discussion at this time, colleagues? Seeing none, I'll ask the treasurer to call the roll if he's prepared so to do.
I am. Ms. Gibbs?
Yes.
Ms. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Peretti?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
President Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Sure.
Vice President Cole?
Yes.
That motion carried, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Thank you, Ms. Gibbs, Mr. Peretti, Ms. Reyes. The only other item on our agenda, does that include your report, Ms. Gibbs?
President Baker, that concludes my report. I would definitely like to take this time to thank Mr. Reimer, Mr. Tombaugh for all of your extensive work and support in this process, to our mediator who gave us gave me some good thought today, to our legal team that helped us navigate, and to our treasurer, Mr. Behor, who also helped us. All of our staff, all of your assistants that pulled all this material together. We were more than prepared for the search. To Board Member Peretti and Reyes, thank you again for some good work, and to all of you who really helped hang in there, go through all these proposals to make this search as evident, very deliberate, so thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you
And
very much.
our only other item on the agenda is just discussion of next steps. We have another meeting scheduled for June 18th, at which we will have our new search firm along with the other members of our team, and we'll move from there. Is there anything else for the good of the cause this evening, colleagues?
And we have the search, that meeting on Monday, and then the school board meeting is on Tuesday.
That's correct, the day after.
Okay.
If there is nothing else for the good of the order, the chair will entertain a motion
So
to
moved.
adjourn.
Second.
All right, Mr. Treasurer, call it quickly.
Ms. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Peretti?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
President Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Brown, Vice President? Mr.
Yes.
Brown? Vice President Cole? Ms. Gibbs?
Yes.
Gibbs.
Yes.
Motion carries.
We stand adjourned. I appreciate your patience this evening.
You almost did like council.
Thank you.
This